Serious students of Reddit who had a sexual relationship with a teacher, how did it start and how did it turn out? I guess I technically had a sexual relationship with a teacher. She was the lab ta for my invertebrate zoology lab, and refused to do anything with me until after the class. After classes, we partied and hooked up quite a lot. After a year of us still being together, other TAs started dating undergrads. 6 years later, we're married and have a kid together. I slept with one of my professors in college. At the time I was 19 or 20 and she was in her mid-30s. I went to see her during her office hours. We talked for a few minutes and when I went to leave she gave me a long hug and told me, "You give really nice hugs," as she held onto my arms. I asked for her number and went on my way. We exchanged a few flirty text messages over the next few days before she invited me over to her apartment to help her hook up a new TV she had bought. We ended up sleeping together about 10 times before she moved away to take a new job at a different school. Had a crush on one of my grad school teachers for a year and a half. I was into everything about her. Looks, brain, everything. I ended up teaching the same subject many years later and I still use the notes and materials from her classes with my own students. She was engaged to someone else so I never even thought about anything ever happening. It was a nice fantasy. Then out of the blue, she calls my cell phone and tells me that she's thinking of getting into yoga and knows that I am into yoga, so would I get a drink with her and tell her more? I was not exactly experienced with hookups and I actually took her at her word. I went expecting to talk about yoga and go home afterwards. We ended up getting totally wasted, making out in the middle of a bar, and then I walked her home where I kept saying I'm sorry and this definitely isn't happening. And I'll just get you to your door and go home. It did happen, but the joke was on her. She got a few seconds of the worst sex of her life and then got to listen to me in the bathroom for a while. The next day she found me in the hallway and told me that it was a huge mistake and asked me not to tell anyone. Nobody would believe me anyway, so I agreed. I can honestly say I wish the entire thing had never happened. She got married and moved on with her life. I ended up having to take her husband's class before I could graduate. My 8th grade teacher. This was during the 80s before all the scandals, when no one really cared if a female teacher was spending a lot of time alone with one of her students. I was 14. She was mid-40s and a family friend who had known me since I was a little kid. She asked me to volunteer for a school activity that had us spending time together after class and occasionally off campus. My mom knew her so wasn't bothered I was spending so much time with her. She had always teased and playfully touched me as a kid. When we were alone after class, she started touching me more and flirting and talking about intimate things like her divorce and asking me if I had a girlfriend yet. She escalated the intimacy through the year, pushing boundaries a little more each time. We started having sex that summer. It went on for about 3 months. She ended it once I went to high school. My family moved out of state after my freshman year. I had a long talk with her before leaving and we parted on good terms. I never spoke to her again, but heard she eventually remarried and became vice principal at another school. She died a few years ago. I'm almost 50 and still think about her quite often. My religious studies college professor. She was hilarious and brilliant and always brought her interests up in class and they usually aligned with mine. It started off with what felt like on-topic to class discussions, then into more friendly casual conversations about books and movies, then it definitely transitioned into flirting, which was weird because I'm also female and had never had feelings for another girl, so I thought it could just be some weird fantasy in my head and I was just making something out of nothing. Anyways, fast forward, semester ends, I'm out of her class. I submit my final at noon. By 1 p.m., she emails me my final grade and says I'm all done submitting your grades, so you're officially no longer my student. Congrats on passing the class and good luck. So I sent back an email with a song attached and then the emailing went on from there before we officially hung out, which led to sex, which led to a 3-year relationship. We moved in together for about a year but it ultimately didn't work out cause we wanted different things long term, but we ended on good terms and I'm grateful for the relationship now 5 years out as it helped me realize what I want in a partner. I now have an amazing boyfriend and I heard she recently got married to a woman she started dating after me. Edit. Thanks for the love, guys. I'm glad my story made some people smile. And for everyone asking about her teaching religious studies, I'd just like to clear up that my major was in religious studies from an analytical perspective. I studied cults, specifically. All of the religious studies classes at my university were purely academic, for people that found religion interesting but didn't necessarily have to practice. She was teaching an introductory course on the philosophy of religious studies. She herself was not religious or affiliated with an religion or new religious movement. I went to a vocational high school and attended the culinary program for 3 years. The baking instructor/pastry chef was 7 years older than me and we grew up in the same small town. When I turned 18 and he left for another profession, we went on a few dates and had sex a couple times. We weren't a good fit together and ended on amicable terms. Pretty uneventful. I fell in love with the workshop supervisor at my university that guides the workshop that I need for my education. She is about a year older than I am. I am doing some small arts and crafts and leatherworking. She was interested in getting something and she bought something custom. I can't remember how it started out, but for some reason or another, we had some drinks which ended in a night spent together and a sexual relationship. We discovered an attraction to each other. She went to the faculty director with the situation and explained it. Since she cannot give marks on my work and is only a guide in the eyes of the university, they approved of the relationship. That was about 3 years ago. We are still together as I am finishing my education. The relationship moved on from the sexual flirt which it all started with to something deep. We live together for 2 years now and she helps me something with running the 2 companies that I set up aside my study. When I finish my education next year I will even propose to her. There was a super hot student teacher that was at our school, so he was only like 22-23 maybe. Does that count? I was 17 and it was at our graduation dinner when we had snuck a bottle of passion pop in, so we were pretty tipsy. I told him I always thought he was hot and before I knew it his hands were down my pants. We still had about 3 weeks to go before we left school, so spent the next week ducking around the school and nearly getting caught a bunch of times. It was pretty ducking hot tbh and I still think about him from time to time. As a person who supervises student teachers, this story gives me anxiety. Happened to me when I was in 7th grade. She was my conversations teacher. TBH, she was my first crush which started when I was in 4th grade. She knew my parents. So, sometimes I had to stay with her when they were late to pick me up from school. It happened 2 months before finals. She told me that she wanted to kiss me and if I was okay with this. I changed my school and she left town some years later. The dilemma is, although I remember time spent with her very fondly, I wouldn't want any other kid to be in the situation as I was in. When I was 19 I dated a professor at my university for a few months. I wasn't his student but he taught some of my friends. We met randomly at a club, and I had no idea he was a professor at my uni until a few days later when we started texting. He was really hot, he had dark hair and bright blue eyes and told me that his female students would flirt with him in office hours. He was 33, so very young for a prof but pretty old for me at the time. It was fun for a bit. He was not happy when we realized he taught some of my friends. The day we realized he taught my friends was when I was at his apartment a couple weeks after meeting and I asked to see some of his class materials. He thought it would be interesting if I could tell the difference between a BS essay and a great essay, even if I wasn't familiar with the subject. So I started reading and realized the BS essay with the failing grade had my friend's name at the top. He was very upset because apparently it's some sort of privacy violation that I was looking at her failed assignment. But I thought it was sexy that he thought my friend's essay sucked, really played up his position of power in my mind. When I was 17 I had a fake ID and went out to the bar with a couple older friends after a hockey game. We met a group of girls out and we hung out for most of the night. I ended up going home with one of the girls. We hooked up that night, we exchanged numbers and I left in the morning. So Monday comes around, I go to school and I walk into my first period class and the same girl I hooked up with is the supply teacher. Her face was about as red as an apple and I was strutting my seat like Vince ducking McMahon. I got a really good evaluation, we didn't have grades, so it was like a 2-page report that said I have the writing skills of a grad student. I am a retard for frame of reference here. It started just like any relationship starts. You can see a twinkle in their eye, they might laugh at something you say that really isn't that funny, and you get a boner. She was way older, but really attractive. And German. So I asked her if she likes beer. She liked beer. So we went to the bar down the road. This is a beer bar, not some hole-in-the-wall type place. We ended up getting Weihenstephaner and Erbachs. Loosened up. Joked around. And then I straight up told her I would like to draw her nude. She saw me drawing in class all the time and said sure. Before we even left the booth at the bar I just said I'm not actually trying to draw you, I just wanna get naked. I have no idea why she found that endearing, but she took me to her house. I'm like, whoa, older women own homes, this is cool, and smoshed. We agreed it was a one-time thing and to be responsible about it. So for the rest of the semester I was secret agent Duck a MILF. It's probably good it was a one-time thing, because if I had the opportunity I would try to move in and pay her in oral sex. It's hard out here for a millennial to get a home.